I woke up to the sound of a zipper opening, but it wasn't from either of our tents. At first, I thought it had to be Max or Joey. We were the only ones out here. 5 miles deep into the Adirondack woods, nobody for miles. Primitive camping, no assigned sites, no ranger patrols. We checked. But the zipper wasn't close. It was farther back, maybe 30 yards into the trees. I froze under my sleeping bag, heart thudding in my ears. Max's steady breathing told me he was still out cold beside me. Joey's tent was a little farther off by the fire pit. He would have called out if it was him. Another zip broke the silence. Closer this time. I gripped my flashlight but didn't turn it on. Out here, light makes you a target. I strained to listen, but the woods were heavy and still, like even the trees were holding their breath. No footsteps. No talking. Just the faint drip of lake water somewhere beyond the camp. I told myself it had to be an animal. Maybe the wind against some gear. But deep down, I knew better. The day before had been perfect. We set up camp by the lake, me and Max sharing one tent, Joey in another a few yards away. We fished, grilled, and joked about horror movies until the stars bled across the sky. Not once did we see another hiker. Not once did we hear another voice. When we turned in around midnight, the woods had felt peaceful. Safe. Now, in the thick black of 3 a.m., they felt like a trap. Another sound snapped me back. Crunch. Soft footfalls moving across the pine needles. Slow. Deliberate. Coming closer. The footsteps circled the camp. Right past my tent. Then Joey's. They paused. Then came the sharp, mechanical rasp of another zipper. Not ours. Not Joey's. Somewhere just beyond the fire pit. My skin prickled with cold sweat. We had set up 2 tents. Only 2. Now, it sounded like someone was opening a third. I stayed frozen, barely breathing, waiting for something, anything, to happen. 5 minutes passed. Maybe 10. Then the footsteps started again, crunching softly into the woods. They faded into silence. I didn't sleep after that. Just lay there, eyes wide, listening to the empty dark pressing down all around me. At first light, I slipped out of the tent. The air was crisp, the ground damp with dew. Joey was already standing by the fire pit, arms crossed, face pale. "You heard it too?" he asked. I nodded. We checked the clearing. Nothing. No tents. No gear. No signs of life. But in the soft dirt near the tree line, we found the prints. Boot tracks. Not ours. They circled our camp. Paused by our tents. Then vanished into the woods. Max tried to laugh it off when he woke up. "Sasquatch," he joked, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. We spent the day half-heartedly fishing, barely speaking. Every snap of a twig. Every gust of wind. We flinched. When the sun set, we didn't bother with a fire. We crawled into our tents early, flashlights gripped tight, waiting for the dark to pull its tricks again. It didn't take long. Around midnight I heard it. Not a zipper this time. A whisper. Close. Right outside our tent. A raspy, wet voice muttering something low and fast. I couldn't make out the words, but they weren't friendly. Max stirred beside me, awake now, frozen like I was. The whispering circled us. A slow, dragging sound like someone sliding their palms across the tent walls. Then, another zipper sound. And this time, heavy breathing. Right outside Joey's tent. And then, the sound of another tent being unzipped deeper in the woods. One that wasn't ours. One that hadn't been there yesterday. Or the day before. Someone, or something, had set up a third tent. And we were no longer alone. For a second, none of us moved. I could hear Max breathing shallow next to me, both of us frozen under our sleeping bags. The whispering outside faded, replaced by the sickening whine of another zipper, out in the trees. Zip. Not our tents. Not Joey's. Something else. Something we hadn't seen when we set up camp. And then footsteps, light, almost playful, drifting toward the lake. I risked a glance at Max. His face was a pale smear in the dark, wide-eyed, sweating. "What the hell is that?" he mouthed. I didn't answer. I didn't know. All I knew was that every instinct in me was screaming the same thing. Do not go outside. Do not make a sound. We lay there, listening, trapped in our own silence. From Joey's tent came a soft shuffle, like he was trying to turn over without making noise. Then a tiny, almost inaudible whisper. "Guys?" Before we could even think to respond, the voice outside cut him off. It mimicked him perfectly. "Guys?" Same pitch. Same breathless fear. But wrong. Off by just a hair. Like someone who'd heard the word once and was now trying it on. Max squeezed my arm so hard I thought he might leave a bruise. The mimic voice drifted closer to Joey's tent. Another zipper. Joey's. My blood turned to ice. I could hear the nylon creak as Joey clamped his tent shut again from inside, zipping it furiously back up. Then a low growl, almost a chuckle, outside. And silence. For a long, unbearable stretch, there was nothing. Not the trees creaking. Not the lake lapping. Nothing. It felt like the entire forest had gone still, waiting. When the first light of dawn finally started bleeding through the trees, Max and I practically fell out of our tent. Joey was already unzipping his, pale and shaking. We said nothing. We didn't pack. We didn't eat. We just grabbed our gear and bolted, leaving the fire pit cold and the clearing behind us. The trail back felt longer than it should have. Every branch snapping in the woods made us whip our heads around. Every gust of wind sent a new spike of panic down my spine. We hiked fast, practically running when we hit the last mile. When we finally reached the gravel lot where we'd left Joey's truck, the sight of it made me want to collapse. We threw our stuff in the back, climbed in, locked the doors, and didn't say a word until we were miles down the highway, the forest shrinking in the rearview mirror. It wasn't until a week later that Max called me. His voice was low, rough like he hadn't slept. "You remember that third tent?" he asked. I didn't say anything. Of course I remembered. "I've been looking it up. Primitive sites out there? Nobody camps without checking in. No rangers found anything the next morning. No reports. Nothing." He hesitated. I could hear him breathing. "And the footprints?" he said. "They didn't come from the trail." I sat there, clutching the phone, my stomach sinking. "They came from the lake. I haven't been camping since. Not once. And if you ever think about pitching a tent where no one can hear you scream, just remember, you might not be alone. Even if you can't see anyone. Even if there's only supposed to be 2 tents. You might hear a zipper in the night. You might hear your own voice whispered back at you. And if you do, don't unzip your tent. Whatever's out there is waiting for you to invite it in." I thought it was just another hiker's lantern out in the woods, until it started following us without making a sound. We weren't supposed to camp there. The site was marked on the map, sure, one of those official backcountry spots along the Appalachian Trail, but when we got there, it didn't feel right. The fire ring was cold. The ground was churned up like something had been dragged across it. And the woods around us? Too quiet. The kind of quiet that makes the hairs on your arms stand up before your brain even knows why. But it was almost dark, and the next site was another 3 miles. Too far with the sun bleeding out, and our legs already screaming from 12 hours of hiking. So we stayed. Me, my friend Cassie, and her boyfriend Mark. We set up the tent quickly, built a small fire, and tried to shake the feeling crawling up our spines. Mark kept saying it was nothing. "Trail maintenance crews probably tore the ground up," he said. "Animals scattered," Cassie added, trying to smile. "The smell of people scares them off." But even she didn't believe it. The woods felt wrong. Like the trees were leaning in too close. Listening. We sat around the fire in a tight little triangle, eating cold trail mix and laughing too loud at dumb jokes, trying to drown out the silence. The darkness swallowed the forest beyond the firelight. And that's when I saw it. A small light. flickering between the trees about 50 yards off the trail. Too high to be a ground fire. Too low to be a star. It bobbed gently side to side, like someone carrying a lantern. "Hey," I said, nudging Cassie. "You see that?" She squinted, nodded slowly. Mark brushed it off. "Probably another hiker." But even as he said it, he frowned. There were no other cars at the trailhead when we started. No sign of anyone all day. No footsteps. No voices. No fresh boot prints in the soft dirt. We hadn't seen a single soul for 15 miles. And now, here in the dead of night, someone just happened to show up? The three of us sat frozen, watching the light bob between the trees. It didn't get closer. It didn't move away. It just stayed, pacing slowly behind the first line of trees. Waiting. Mark finally stood up, tossing another log onto the fire like that would somehow scare it off. "Probably lost," he muttered. "I'll call out." Before we could stop him, he cupped his hands around his mouth and shouted, "Hey! You need help?" The sound shattered the fragile silence, echoing off the trees. The light froze. For a long heartbeat, it didn't move at all. Then it flickered, like someone swinging it back and forth, and started moving again. But not away. Toward us. Cassie grabbed my arm, nails digging into my skin. Mark stood stiff, eyes locked on the trees. The light bobbed closer, maybe 30 yards now. Still no sound. No crunch of leaves, no snap of branches. Nothing. Just that damn light weaving silently between the trunks. My mouth went dry. If it was a hiker, where was their voice? Where were their footsteps? No headlamp glow. No flashlight beam. Just that old, yellow lantern light. Cassie whispered, "We need to go." Mark shook his head. "Where?" "It's pitch black." He was right. Running blindly into the woods would be suicide. Break an ankle, get turned around, get lost. But staying? Sitting here while that thing, or that someone, walked right up to us. That was suicide too. The fire cracked sharply, making all three of us jump. When we looked back, the light had disappeared. Gone. Swallowed by the trees. We sat there, frozen, every nerve in my body screaming. Waiting. Listening. The woods were silent. Then, behind us, closer than before. The soft, slow crunch of footsteps. The footsteps were slow. Measured. Like whoever, or whatever, was out there knew exactly where we were and wasn't in any rush to get closer. Cassie clamped her hand over her mouth to stifle a gasp. Mark hissed, "Into the woods!" Now. We didn't argue. We grabbed what we could, no time for tents, no time for gear, and slipped into the darkness beyond the firelight, hearts pounding so loud I thought whoever was out there would hear them. We moved fast but careful, staying low, weaving between trees and roots, trying not to make noise. The deeper we went, the colder the air seemed to get. Each breath came out in short, ragged clouds. Behind us, the footsteps didn't follow. Not yet. When we dared to glance back, the clearing where we'd camped was still visible, the dim glow of the dying fire casting weak light across the trunks. And standing at the edge of it, just outside the light. A figure. A man. Or at least the shape of one. Tall. Thin. Motionless. He held something in his hand. It wasn't a flashlight. It wasn't even a proper lantern. It was an old, cracked glass lamp, the kind you see in horror movies or antique shops, its flame sputtering but somehow never going out. The figure stood there, holding it loosely at his side. Watching. Waiting. Mark tugged at our sleeves. "Move!" he breathed. We went deeper. Branches clawed at our faces. Roots tried to trip our feet. Every step felt like it echoed through the trees. We didn't stop until the campfire glow was gone completely. Swallowed by the black. Only then did we collapse behind a fallen tree, gasping for breath. Cassie's teeth chattered, not from cold, but pure terror. "What the hell is he?" she whispered. None of us answered. Because deep down, we didn't believe it was just a man anymore. Not after the silent light. Not after the way he moved, or didn't move at all. For what felt like an hour, we sat huddled there, listening. Every crack of a twig. Every sigh of the wind. Waiting to hear the footsteps again. Waiting for that lantern light to appear between the trees. But the woods stayed dark. Silent. Finally, Mark whispered, "We wait till dawn. Then we hike." It was a good plan. The only plan. If we tried to move now, we'd get lost or worse, walk right into him. We stayed low. Huddled together. I kept my eyes wide open, afraid that if I blinked, I'd miss the moment the light came back. But the forest stayed empty. At least, that's what I told myself. The night dragged on. The cold seeped into our bones. Cassie eventually leaned against me, trembling with exhaustion. Mark kept gripping the handle of his camping knife so tight his knuckles went white. None of us slept. Not even for a second. When the first gray light of dawn finally started bleeding through the trees, we moved. Carefully. Quietly. We backtracked toward the trail as best we could, using Cassie's compass to stay oriented. No sign of the man. No sign of the lantern. When we reached the clearing where our tents had been, the fire was long dead. Our gear was gone. Not scattered. Gone. Everything, tents, packs, sleeping bags, erased like we'd never been there at all. Except for one thing. In the center of the cold ashes sat the old cracked lantern. Still flickering. We didn't speak. We didn't dare. We just ran. We reached the car hours later, soaked in sweat and fear. As we peeled out of the gravel lot, Cassie twisted in her seat to look out the rear window. I didn't want to look. But I did. Standing at the edge of the trees, so far away it could have almost been a trick of the light, was a figure. Tall. Thin. Holding a dim, sputtering lantern. Watching us leave. I don't hike anymore. Not on real trails. Not anywhere you can't see both ends of the path. Because sometimes, when you're miles from the nearest town and the sun's going down, you might see a little light bobbing between the trees. And if you do, don't follow it. Because it's not trying to find its way out of the woods. It's trying to bring you deeper in. We all heard the whistling that night, but when we followed it, we realized it was leading us somewhere we weren't supposed to find. It was supposed to be a quick overnight trip. Me, my cousin Brandon, and two of our friends, Adam and Seth. Just one night out on Devil's Hollow Trail, a name that should have been a red flag, but wasn't. It was just a name to us. Some stupid old myth from a backwater part of Virginia. The plan was simple: hike in before sunset, camp by the river, hike out at first light. We made it to the river just before dark. Pitched our tents. Built a small fire. Everything felt normal. The crickets. The wind in the trees. The glow of firelight bouncing off the river's surface. Normal. It was after midnight when we heard it. A whistle. Thin. High. Almost tuneless. It floated through the trees from somewhere upriver. At first, we thought it was an owl or the wind through the pines. But then it happened again. Clearer. Closer. 3 notes. A rising, falling, rising pattern. Exactly the kind of thing some old-school hiker might do to signal their group. We looked at each other across the fire, frowning. "You think someone's lost?" Brandon said. "Maybe," Adam said, but he didn't sound convinced. None of us wanted to say the obvious. We hadn't passed a single hiker all day. No boot prints. No voices. No campfires. We were alone out here. The whistling came again. 3 notes. A little closer. Seth grabbed his flashlight. "We should check it out." I'd opened my mouth to protest, but I didn't. Because if it was someone in trouble, we'd never forgive ourselves for ignoring it. We killed the fire, grabbed our lights, and started up the narrow trail along the river. The woods swallowed us fast. No moon. Just the cones of our flashlights cutting weak beams into the darkness. The river gurgled softly to our left. The trees loomed black and skeletal to our right. We followed the trail in single file, the whistling guiding us deeper. After about 15 minutes, we reached a fork in the trail. Left kept following the river. Right veered sharply uphill into dense woods. The whistle came again, clearer now. It was coming from the right. Seth started that way without hesitation. Brandon hesitated. "You sure, man? That doesn't look like a real trail." Seth shrugged. "Maybe they left the path trying to find help." Adam shifted nervously behind me. "I don't like it." Neither did I. But we went anyway. Because that's what you do when you think someone needs saving. Even when everything inside you is screaming to turn around. The trail barely existed, just a narrow break in the trees, like something had plowed through years ago and left a scar. We climbed uphill, flashlights sweeping the roots and rocks underfoot. The whistling kept coming. Always ahead of us. Always just out of reach. No matter how far we walked. 20 minutes in, the air started to change. It got colder. Stiller. The woods around us felt wrong. The trees were thicker here, gnarled and leaning in too close. And underneath everything, the chirp of insects, the trickle of the river, there was something else. A smell. Faint. Rotten. Like meat left out too long. Brandon pulled up short. "You guys smell that?" We all nodded. The whistle came again. This time, so close it made us jump. We stopped. Flashlights darting between the trees. Nothing. Just endless woods. And then, a flash. Something reflective deep between the trunks, like the glint of metal catching our lights. We stared, squinting. It was small. Maybe chest high. Shining faintly in the dark. Another whistle. Closer. Almost behind us. That's when Adam turned his light toward the ground, and froze. His face went pale, mouth working silently. I stepped closer and shined my own light down. There, half buried in the dirt, was a boot. Old. Caked with mud. Still laced tight around something that looked horribly like a foot. Next to it, a crushed plastic whistle. Broken clean in half. The whistle stopped. Dead silence dropped over the woods. No wind. No river. Nothing. Then, from deep in the trees, the sound of something big. Moving fast. Straight toward us. The sound crashed through the woods, heavy footsteps pounding the earth, branches snapping under the weight. Coming straight at us. "Run!" Seth breathed. We didn't need to be told twice. We turned and sprinted downhill, flashlights jerking wildly with every desperate step. The trees clawed at us. Roots grabbed at our feet. The cold, stinking air burned in my lungs. Behind us, whatever was chasing us wasn't bothering to dodge anything. It just smashed through the forest, relentless, unstoppable. And under the crashing, I heard it again. A whistle. 3 notes. Rising. Falling. Rising. Mocking. I lost sight of Seth first. 1 second he was just ahead of me, the next he was gone, swallowed by the dark. I heard him shout, a sharp, terrified cry, and then nothing. Brandon screamed his name. No answer. We didn't stop. Couldn't stop. If we went back for him, we'd be next. We burst out onto the main trail, back by the river. The familiar crunch of the path underfoot almost made me sob with relief. We didn't slow down. We ran. Branches whipped past. Rocks skidded under our boots. Every muscle in my body screamed, but fear pushed me harder than adrenaline ever could. Behind us, the crashing grew fainter. Then stopped altogether. I risked a glance back. Nothing but empty woods. No footsteps. No light. No figure. No Seth. We staggered back into camp just as the first threads of dawn stretched across the river. The fire pit was still there. The tents still standing. But something was wrong. Adam gasped and dropped his pack. Because right there, sitting neatly on top of the stones where our fire had burned hours ago, was a boot. Old. Caked with mud. The same one we'd seen in the woods. And next to it, cradled carefully like a trophy, Seth's whistle. Not broken anymore. Whole. Clean. Like it had been waiting for us. Brandon backed away, shaking his head, whispering, "No. No. No." Adam grabbed my arm. "We have to go. Now." We didn't pack. We didn't even look back. We left everything, tents, gear, food. We sprinted for the trailhead as the sun dragged itself up over the horizon, every step putting more blessed distance between us and Devil's Hollow. We made it back to town hours later. When we burst into the ranger station, filthy and wild-eyed, they called the sheriff. We told them everything. About the whistling. About the broken trail. About Seth. They organized a search party. Dogs. Drones. Volunteers. But they didn't find anything. No boot. No whistle. No Seth. It was like he'd never been there at all. Weeks later, Brandon called me late at night. I could hear in his voice he hadn't been sleeping either. "I've been reading about Devil's Hollow," he said. "Old stories. From way back." I didn't want to know. But he told me anyway. How the early settlers said something lived in those woods. Something that whistled to lure people off the path. Led them somewhere they couldn't come back from. How the old-timers used to warn kids, if you hear a whistle after dark, don't follow it. Don't answer it. Just run. Run and don't stop. I don't hike anymore. I don't even walk through the woods alone. Because sometimes, in the dead of night, when the house is still and the world feels too quiet, I swear I can hear it. Just faintly. 3 notes. Rising. Falling. Rising. Calling. Waiting. Promising if I just step outside. Just follow a little farther. I'll find whatever's still missing in those woods. And this time? I won't be coming back. At first, we thought it was just an injured elk limping through our camp, but elk don't walk on 2 legs. It happened 2 summers ago, up in the Gallatin National Forest in Montana. Me, my buddy Eric, and my girlfriend Natalie had taken a long weekend to get off the grid. No service. No backup plan. Just 3 tents, a campfire, and the kind of silence you can only find miles away from pavement. We picked a spot off a service road, hiked in a couple of miles, and set up camp near a broad clearing. Pine trees stretched for miles in every direction. The nearest ranger station was 20 miles back. The first day was everything we wanted. Cold beers. Fishing. Hiking trails that looked like they hadn't seen another pair of boots in years. At sunset, we built a fire and settled in for the night. No stress. No noise. Just the crackling of flames and the occasional hoot of an owl somewhere deep in the trees. It must have been after midnight when we first heard it. A soft, stumbling crunch through the brush. Eric was the first to sit up. "Deer," he muttered. Natalie stayed curled in her sleeping bag, half asleep. But I sat up too. It didn't sound like a deer. It was heavier. The steps were slow, dragging. Like something injured. For a moment, I thought maybe it was an elk. We'd seen plenty of elk sign on the trails earlier that day. But something about the sound raised the hairs on my arms. It wasn't cautious, the way prey animals usually are. It wasn't moving like it was afraid of us. It sounded like it didn't care. Eric unzipped the tent and peeked out. I crawled up beside him. At first, there was nothing, just the dying glow of our fire, the ring of trees beyond. Then we saw it. A figure. Shuffling through the clearing about 30 yards from the fire. Tall. Thin. Moving weird, like its joints weren't bending the right way. In the low light, it looked like an elk standing awkwardly on its hind legs, its front limbs hanging wrong. I remember whispering, "What the hell?" Eric laughed nervously. "Maybe it's sick." Neither of us believed it. Because even from that distance, we could tell. It wasn't an elk. It wasn't any animal we'd ever seen. And it was heading straight for our tents. We ducked back inside, hearts hammering. "What do we do?" Natalie whispered. Eric grabbed the hunting knife from his pack. I fumbled for the bear spray in mine. Neither felt like enough. The steps got closer. Slow. dragging. Uneven. I pressed my ear to the nylon wall. I could hear it breathing. Ragged. Wet. Like each breath hurt. Closer now. Then, a loud thud against something soft. Natalie squeaked and clamped a hand over her mouth. Eric and I exchanged a look. The food pack. We tied it high up in a tree about 10 yards from the tents, away from the fire. Whatever this thing was, it had found it. We heard tearing sounds. Snapping. Crunching. It wasn't just rummaging through the bag. It was ripping it apart like tissue paper. Part of me wanted to unzip the tent and run for it. Make a break for the woods. But I couldn't move. None of us could. Because we knew deep down. If we ran, it would follow. And maybe that's exactly what it wanted. The fire outside popped loudly as a log collapsed into itself. The thing let out a low, gurgling grunt, like it was annoyed, and then the sounds of tearing stopped. Silence. Complete. Total. Oppressive. I strained to listen. Seconds dragged by like hours. Then, soft, slow footsteps. Getting closer. Not toward the food pack. Not toward the woods. Toward us. The steps were slow. Deliberate. Like it was savoring the moment. I gripped the bear spray so hard my knuckles went numb. Eric crouched by the zipper, knife drawn but useless against whatever was out there. Natalie huddled between us, silent tears tracking down her cheeks. The creature's shadow stretched across the wall of our tent. Twisted, towering, wrong. It paused just outside. I swear I could hear it sniffing. Drawing in slow, shuddering breaths. Savoring the scent of us. We held still. Frozen. I didn't dare blink. The tent wall bulged inward slightly, like something was pressing against it with a finger, testing it. One soft poke. Then another. Like it was trying to figure out how thin the barrier really was. The nylon trembled. Natalie whimpered. I squeezed her hand, barely breathing. For a long, agonizing minute, it just stood there. Then, a sound. Not footsteps. Not breathing. It was a voice. A low, slurred, wet voice. From just outside the tent. It said, in a broken, almost childlike way, "Come out." I felt my heart stop. I don't mean I froze. I mean my heart literally skipped a beat. Eric's knife hand trembled. Natalie squeezed her eyes shut. "Come out!" It croaked again. Closer now. Like it had leaned down. Its mouth inches from the fabric. The zipper moved. I swear to God. We watched, horrified, as the tiny metal pull on the tent's zipper twitched. Just a little. Then stopped. The fire outside sputtered, throwing a brief flash of light through the nylon. And in that flash, we saw it. Just a glimpse. Just enough. An eye. Huge. Yellowed. Bloodshot. Staring right at us. Through the thin wall of the tent. I don't know who broke first. Maybe all three of us at once. We screamed, kicked the back of the tent open with our boots, and bolted. Blind. Desperate. Branches whipped our faces. Rocks cut our hands and knees. The cold air tore at our lungs. We didn't care. We just ran. Behind us, we heard a shriek, high and furious, like an animal in rage. Something thrashed through the clearing. Something fast. Something heavy. But we didn't look back. We didn't stop until we hit the dirt service road we'd hiked in on hours earlier. By then, the eastern sky was just starting to lighten. We collapsed in a heap, gasping, bleeding, shaking. The forest behind us loomed dark and endless. But whatever was chasing us, it didn't follow us onto the road. It stayed in the trees. Watching. Waiting. We flagged down the first car we saw, some beat-up pickup heading toward the ranger station. The driver took one look at our faces and didn't ask a single question. Just told us to get in. We never found our gear. The rangers went back a few days later. Searched the site. They said it looked like a bear had torn through it. That's what they put in their report anyway. Bears don't whisper. Bears don't unzip tents. and bears sure as hell don't stare at you with human eyes. I don't know what we saw that night. Some people say there are things deep in the forests that never learned to be human. Things that learn how to mimic us. But not perfectly. Things that wait in the dark for people too far from help. All I know is, if you ever hear heavy footsteps dragging through the woods in the middle of the night, if you ever see something that almost looks like an animal, if you ever hear a voice outside your tent whispering for you to come out, don't. Because once you step outside, you're not coming back the same. If you come back at all.